But you have to just talk about your editing tip, because I think that's one of the greatest things that I remember you talked about it in your podcast with Kate, that you cross-posted with yours, I know.
Yeah.
But you've got to explain that 120 beats and the 240 beats editing thing. It's genius.
Sure. As far as editing, I think Gabby's going to go a lot more into this in those other videos. But the biggest tip, especially if you're using GarageBand or Audacity, like one of these free ones, DAWs. So this is going to be a blast for the past. Look at that old GarageBand interface for you there. So you can see here, I have different tracks for all of my different parts, my music, my bumper, my little transition bumper.
That's another tip right there too, though. Just save as, and then, then you've got your template, like you said.
Yeah. So
and
final template.
Yeah. And then you create and then you copy that file and then just bring somebody else's stuff in. So that bumper music stays the same in the same spot at the same level every time.
And I have my like standard EQ and compression settings. If I want to use either, I just turn it on. Standard EQ. I usually always leave EQ on. And I just do a filter, usually to around 100, and then I add a little sparkle to get that nice sound at the top there. But the real tip is when I'm listening, because my interview, let's look at the timestamp here. My interview, if I listened to every single interview, it's already about an hour long, a little over. So what I do is go up here to the little metronome and I type 240. So I double it and now I can listen.
And the chipmunks are talking. No.
Yeah. So it's
everyone's
plays
caffeinated.
Back. Yeah. Everybody sounds super excited. You just have to make sure that you don't export it while it's still at 240. But the other thing is, I do think sometimes, and keep in mind your GarageBand probably looks nicer and newer, I think you have to go to the little scissors icon here. I don't know what that is actually called. The editors icon. There you go. And I think you have to be able to enable flex, or maybe, no, it's region. You have to click follow tempo and pitch. That was what Kate was saying. She was like, when I tried to do that, it didn't work. I was like, oh, your track has to be following the tempo.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how you save, for me, 30 minutes time, which, this is a hobby. This is a thing on the side. It has to be in its place. I can't always be working on, a podcast or whatever.
Yeah, you can imagine that there are professional podcasts that are doing what we call riding the faders, that there's somebody in a very fancy studio somewhere that, as celebrity X is going back and forth into their microphone and all over the place.
Joe Rogan and Dak Shepard. And
they are riding the faders, and there's somebody sitting in another room in live time, changing all that. We don't have that because we're the unwashed masses just messing around with our audio interface.
Not getting $10 million not to do that.
So quick editing and all that. I thought that was essential. Great tip there.
Let's see. Are there any other tips we want to cover? Yeah, I know Gabby's going to get more into like splicing and arranging and volume automation, EQ and compression. But I think the main point is after that, like we said, how do you construct a story? I mean, when you're prepping the interview, you want to think about prepping it. And then I think editing after the fact. Are there parts that need to be omitted? Are there parts that I need to maybe go back on? Maybe if you're talking to this one person, you might be able to either, hey, can you send me a voice memo? I have an extra little clip. It could be as simple as that. For me, it's funny. All my interviews that have had technical issues have all been my friends for some reason. And it's like my audio got messed up. Their audio got messed up. So I've re-recorded interviews. One stupid thing I've done is my audio was messed up. So what I did, and it I don't know, it was an interface issue or something. It was like glitchy robot sounds, it sounded crazy. You could still hear my voice, but it had crazy transients.
Yeah.
So I've literally listened to the interview, paused, re-recorded me saying that statement or that question, and redone the whole hour. And I'm like, was that worth it? It's definitely better than like the audio gremlins. But what do you do with salvaging uh, tough interviews or anything like that? Is there any tips you have for that?
Sometimes, and you learn this lesson the hard way, sometimes it is having the redundancy or the backup to the backup to the backup. There were times I've been part of running groups, and we're the timers at races, and if there's a group of people you don't want to anger, it's runners at races. So there's always the timing, there's bibs and chips and numbers, but that is the first system. And then the second system is that, there's somebody right at the finish line who's taking camera of everything that you can review. And then there's a redundancy upon the redundancy where there's somebody 20 feet past yelling out bib numbers, 268, 274, doing that sort of thing. And you need the same when you're recording. So I've learned that I'm going to have this all set up. And then this is also going to go directly into GarageBand. So that's going to be a backup with just my half of things on top of it. And then I'm always going to have the voice memo happening and have this about a foot away from me so that if I need to,
it's better than nothing.
Yeah. It's better than nothing. And I can come back to it just in case something kind of goes really, really wrong. So building up any sort of redundancy systems could save you some time, and it can also save you some potential embarrassment on the phone call later to the guest saying, didn't go very well. Having said that, listen to your professional interviews and you'll hear them every now and then. You'll hear them say, so this is our third time trying this, or whatever it is. And you go, it happens to absolutely everybody. Nothing is perfect about it.
Yeah. There was I think it's that same podcast that I was telling you about, the one talking about interviews. Another thing to like release yourself is like, if it's not a good interview, you don't have to release it. So, but I think that has to be part of the conversation with your guest. You have to tell them like, hey, I'm going to edit this, even if it's slightly, right? Like you're going to have to usually make a cut or two. Yeah. So I'm going to edit it, and I have the right not to do it. So I understand that might be frustrating, but if the audio quality is terrible and we would have to do another chat or whatever, because you can listen when you first put the earphones on, you can go, okay, everything's sounding great. And then it just happens to go haywire, like you said, in the middle. And maybe the phone sounds terrible. Maybe something happened. Maybe the computer crashed, whatever the issue is. So I think just keep in mind, like you reserve the right to do whatever you want to do with your podcasts. So I know music therapists are helpers. And they're, a lot of us are people pleasers and things like that. But like, it's your thing, you're doing the thing, and you want to do right by those people. But keep in mind, like, if it's not going to work, if it's inappropriate, if you feel like it doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be offensive, but it just doesn't jive with your message. Just practice that confrontational skill and say, hey, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to work. If you want to try it again, try it again. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Right. So, but you got to make a few of those mistakes before you get to the point where you feel confident enough, I think, about those things too.
Yeah. You the first couple of times you played an F bar chord, they weren't good, right?
Nope.
So it's going to be like anything else. Give yourself some patience and kindness and some self-compassion for your first 10 to 20 podcasts or so, which is why that's a good tip that you had about listening back and about making sure that you're trying with friends, especially initially, and in giving yourself those trial periods too. Yeah. Because to get to your the last tip that you had in here, which is really just like, how do you finish the interview? How do you carry them across the finish line? Make sure that they feel good about that experience and everything. To get to that point, to really feel like you're so in control of all of the technology stuff, but also the interviewing process, to feel that kind of comfort. It's really, it can really be a good feeling. And that's this thing that's going to keep on engendering more and more of that goodwill towards guests and
Yeah.
future guests too. So that's important.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, that last little housekeeping is good. And I think one of the best things you can do if you have an interview based podcast and you're looking for people is just go, hey, do you know anybody else that would like to do this? And they've got friends more than likely, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
in research, we call that the snowball sampling method, right? It's just like
exactly.
they're the first couple, particles of snow that's rolling together, and then they're going to tell somebody else, and they'll build on top of that.
Yeah.
So that you've got this big, huge snowball at the bottom of the hill, 20 interviews later.
Yeah. Well, I think we've probably kicked this horse pretty good. Is there any other things you want to cover on with this?
No, I think so. Again, take a look at the PDF that we have here. A big part of the gear on top, and then hosting, and then being a good interviewer on the bottom. And a lot of this stuff that's in this particular Nook, it all fits together. Some of it overlaps, and then of course, what you can do is just make sure you get back to technook.co and then get hold of us for further tips or lessons and that sort of thing as well.